Hello, I'm Brad. I'm going to talk about those people who can't hear the truth. And there's a lot of them. Most people, okay? And if you've been listening to any of my recent or past videos and have difficulty understanding what's going on, it's because I speak the truth. I speak for the truth, so everything I speak is the truth. And the truth is different, and the reason is when God created everybody, He created them within Him as thoughts. So everybody's created as the thought, as the truth, I should say. Okay, we're the truth in our created state. But when He put us in the flesh, He put us in the flesh, especially the first one, the first Adam and Eve were the first bodies, especially Adam's. His was the first flesh to be made, and he made it with the corrupt DNA. Now, there's a little story that goes around this moment when he made Adam, and he says he put Adam in this garden. Okay, well, this garden is who Adam is, both his created state and his flesh. His created state is the tree of life. Okay, that's the truth. That's where he gets all his thoughts from, because that's where he was created. So that's the tree of life, and God said, well, whether he said that or not, that's where he got all his thoughts originally, to begin with. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil are the corrupt DNA that God put in the flesh, and this DNA causes or gives power to deceive these thoughts from the tree of life. You know, from the truth. It deceives those thoughts. So Adam had no choice but to sin later on, and not really sin. We've gotten this sin thing kind of out of line, because what it is really is we got this sin nature in us, and different kinds of things. I mean, you know, some of us have greed, some of us have lust, some of us have, you know, we all have this nature in us. But what it does is it causes us to disobey His commands. He commanded Adam to not, you know, eat of those thoughts when they come. You know, the strong thoughts of lust. You know, to lust after somebody. Don't partake of that. You know, deny that. But you know, God knew it was impossible. He knew that those desires that the corrupt DNA would cause would be way stronger than they could handle. You know, you just can't do it. Certain people in the future would, like the prophets and the saints and stuff. But the first one, he knew they were going to be sinners. And so that's what that story is about. It's just about setting up, you know, it's in symbolic form, in symbolic form, because he wanted us saints to understand it. He didn't want anybody else to understand that. Okay, it's not really hidden, but it's hidden to people that don't have the truth, because they need the whole story in order to understand that. It's taken me almost 2 years to understand that one simple symbolic story, because there's so much to it. There's so much to it. It takes half the Bible just to understand what happened with Adam and Eve. You know, that sin nature was put there for a reason. And the reason is God wanted the whole world deluded. He wanted everybody liars. And that's what these this corrupt DNA does. Causes you to be liars. I was a liar for a long time. And so it deceives you, it twists the truth, and then whatever comes out of you is a lie. So the truth is coming into you as far as thoughts. Comes into your brain, but then your body deceives those thoughts coming out. You see things wrong. You hear things wrong. You speak wrong. Not according to the truth, but according to your flesh. So Adam he had stuff coming in, but he wasn't speaking to anybody. He didn't have anybody with him. He didn't have a partner. He didn't have a partner to deal with. That's why God chose to only have him for a while, so he'd get together language. He went out naming all the things so he'd get some vocabulary words. And God, formed the words in his mouth, because Adam didn't know how to name anything. So God had to do everything for him. Everything. He was just a body. And all these thoughts his created thoughts come from God. So in there was the way God was teaching him. And of course everything comes from God. So Adam prepared this, or was used to get this language together, and then God formed another mate for him, the female. Now, there's something to sin with. We shouldn't say, something to disobey God's commandments, not to partake in those thoughts. And, evidently, it doesn't matter which one sinned and which one disobeyed God. But, they saw each other naked and they went for it. Their lust just, overwhelmed them. And they started touching each other, and the feelings started coming, and the organs started working, and all those things. And pretty soon they were having sex, and whatever else they had going. Everything looked good to them. The whole world looked good to them. And instead of instead of using God's thoughts, you see, these desires took over, and God just kind of disappeared. So those symbolic stories don't mean that God did this and said this to them and stuff. It just means that it was just a natural event, and it naturally happened between them. God didn't have to go and say, "Oh yeah, you did this now, and now now you deserve this, and you're going to have to do this." It just happened. They started sinning. They lost their thought of God, the truth, and their deception of the world took over, and their lust for each other. But this is what God wanted. For one thing, He needed the lust, the sin of lust, for procreation. If lust hadn't happened, nobody would have been born. That's how powerful lust is. And if you think that you're doing it for God, you're going to bed and having sex because of God. Yeah, you are, but in a sinful way. Not because if you were from God, if you were one of God's, He'd take the sex drive away from you, like He did with me. I have no more lust. He takes all sins away. So I don't have any lust. I have no desire for sex. So I can't have children, because it wouldn't work. It doesn't work. It works, but there's no control. There's nothing to it. So I don't know that I could have kids anymore. But anyway, so that sin nature wasn't just for sinning. Okay, they were important to build this world, this deluded world, so we could live in it. There's lots of reasons He did this. It wasn't just for one purpose. It had many reasons, and one of them was for us to be able to survive after the flood. Now we have harsh weather. You know, we have conditions on this earth now that they didn't have in the first while that Adam and Eve were living, and all the rest of the people up until Noah. And then Noah was used to speak the word to have this flood, and of course to build that ark to save some people and some of the animals. Well, anyway, you know, there's just certain animals. Not all the animals had to go in the ark. Some people say, oh, all the animals had to go. No, only the ones that God knew that needed to, you know, use the boat for survival. You know, there's probably some birds and stuff, that ducks, and you know, there's things that could float on the water and whatnot. He probably had, there's places in the world that did, you know, stay above water long, or you know, it just worked out. God did it all, okay? He worked everything out. It doesn't make any difference. So those first people that got wiped out, you know, it says, oh, they got wiped out because of their sins. No, it wasn't because of that. If that was the reason, then we would have been wiped out every 1,000 years, because we all had sin nature. We were all sinners. There was nobody that was good, you know. And so the greed was important to get a monetary system going, so that people could work and get this money going. You know, it did make it easier for people to survive. But of course, you can see the other end of the result. You got the rich people that, you know, well, that was all just deception anyway. You got the rich and the poor and the sick and the, you know, the athletes, and I mean, we got it all. All the different skin colors, the eye color, the hair colors, the shapes of our face and heads, our bodies. It's all part of the deception. It all come in the DNA. And if you don't think DNA is a part of this, then just, well, take away the flesh. Then what do you got? There's nothing. It's all in the flesh. The flesh is where now he can change the DNA. Anytime, at any moment, he can change the DNA. Because God does that. So he can change a sin. He could say, well, you had a greedy family, I'm going to put the sin of lust in you with alcohol. You're going to be an alcoholic and lust after all women. And you're going to be, you know, your family's going to totally reject you because they're rich and they do everything just right, and you're a drunken, lusty jerk, you know. Or maybe you're homosexual. Maybe, you know, you're the only homosexual in your whole family history. So see, God changed that in you. That nature didn't come from your from your families. That came from God, specifically from Him. Okay, so that's how He can change, and so that's why you see some alcoholic families, and all of a sudden now you got people that are okay, don't have any problem with alcohol. Or there's many things like that. We are just living in, and it's, you know what? It's an organized chaos. We're all just, you know, deceived, but there's organization, so you can see that God has been planning everything. Everything's done by God. We can't create nothing. God creates it all. He puts those thoughts in our minds. Okay, so they, you know, we put buildings up and things like that. Now that ain't the truth. It's from the truth, but everything was originated from God's plans. Now people say, oh, God wouldn't do that. He's not evil, and you know, He wouldn't kill people. He would. Well, it says right in the scriptures He does. He killed them. He killed everybody. Okay, the light energy, the power that He created, light energy, that power makes life, and you know, destroys it. It doesn't destroy the original creation, our thoughts in God, but the flesh. Forms the flesh, and then he kills it. Forms it, kills it. How else do you explain somebody that's died in the womb? There's many, many, many babies who have died in the womb of a woman. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't even get to live life. They still have a sin nature because they were on their way out. You know, they were gathering that sin nature. They had DNA. So they were going to be born sinners. But they don't know the truth. They don't understand the truth. Now they get out of the womb and start crawling around and growing up and things like that. Their sin nature kicks in. It's just like Adam when he first got, when he was first formed, he went out and named all these things. He didn't sin because he was taking everything in from God, but nothing was coming out. And it's just like a baby. They're getting the thoughts from God. That's what makes them live. But it wasn't until all of a sudden their desires start kicking in. They get to be 5 or 6 years old, and I had my lust desire kick in when I was as old as I can remember, 4 years old, 5 years old. I lusted after girls when I was that young. It was incredibly strong, absolutely incredible. But that would be the sin that God waited till toward the end to get rid of, because that was my part of my enjoyment of life. That's what made me like this life. I loved looking at beautiful women. I just loved it. And of course that's all my memory now, and I still like to look at them, but I know my memory doesn't have any power. I don't have any more. God cleaned my DNA and changed it, so I don't have any power with those thoughts. That's the defeated. That's Satan. That's defeated. Okay, he's still in there, in my flesh, in my memory, but he can't do nothing about it. So when I say Satan, that's my flesh. Okay, that's my old sinful nature. That's my flesh that was getting in the way of God. Now that God changed my DNA, and I no longer have any sin problems. I no longer I can't follow those thoughts in my memory anymore. It won't happen, because God has control of my body, and I do what He does. He wants me to do. So now I don't have struggles anyway. Have to feel guilty or ashamed or anything like that. But those memories are still there, like I said, and they still tempt. They tempt you every day. Now Paul was talking about that, the thing, the thorn in his side. Well, that was just a symbolic saying for this thought of killing saints in his mind. It never went away. Can you imagine that? Having to kill probably, who knows, hundreds of saints probably in the beginning until he became a saint. And then now have to deal with that. While he's a saint, he's telling these chosen ones, that are listening to him, I have this thorn in my side. And of course he told a lot of people that he actually was a killer, of the saints. So those thoughts don't go away just because we become a saint. Those are, and Jesus, when he was in the wilderness, he had Satan tempting him. Well, Satan was his memory. Now, not that Jesus was a sinner, but he picked up all the sins of all around him. He saw his brother's sin. He saw his parents' sin, and all the Jewish Pharisees and all the teachers and everybody around him. That's all in his mind. The world is deluded, and it puts this sin nature in your memory, whether you want it to or not. So that was why Jesus said he was no good. Even though he was made sinless, he didn't have any of that sin nature, but it was his memory that was no good. And that's why his body had to be put to death. Well, eventually he was going to die anyway. But he was used as a sacrifice. So he didn't have any, he was pure as far as the sin nature goes. And that's what God needed as far as that sacrifice. So that was the important part. Okay, the important part that he was made sinless was because then God could reveal his knowledge in him. God can't reveal his knowledge in a sinner. He can still use, like the prophets, he still used them as sinners, but he couldn't reveal the knowledge to them. So they didn't understand who the truth was. They knew who God was because he's forcing them to obey his commands. And they did all kinds of things as sinners. They didn't want to do those things. They were forced to do them. God has so much power. He just makes you do something. If you're going against him, he'll force you to do it. He puts you right on the floor when he changes DNA. Right to the floor. You don't have no choice. Sinners have never experienced that kind of power from God. They read the Bible and read the scriptures, interpret them and things like that, and they think certain things in their life happen, because God's doing it. But yeah, he's doing it, but not in the way he's doing it with the saints and Jesus. Okay? He's putting all these ideas in your mind because he planned everything. And he wanted you to obey all these pagan gods and ideas. And every time the wind blows, you think it's him. He wants you to know that for deception reason, not to be used like a saint. A saint becomes what a saint is a sinful body, okay, that gets commanded to become obedient to God. And then of course he changes the DNA in a way so that by the time he makes you sinless, you cannot sin ever again. It just won't happen. And that's when he can use you. He uses your body. He's the one that's in command of it. And what he does is the body becomes his. And that's what he told me when I first started getting these new thoughts. He said those thoughts were me. I mean him and me. And his flesh was becoming his. So I was becoming him and he was becoming me. It's a really difficult thing to understand. And Jesus had a hard time teaching anybody that too. The disciples didn't understand him by the time he died. They had no clue what he was talking about. They're getting all this stuff that they were getting from him was going into their memory. Okay, and that was the vocabulary that God needed them to have for when they became sinless saints. So they had to wait till Jesus died, for that sacrifice, so they could become sinless. You see, the prophets couldn't become sinless before Jesus because he hadn't died yet. So that's how important this sacrifice was. That's how important Jesus was. Now, did Jesus do anything? No! He was just a body. He was just a flesh like you and me. But he was the first man to ever become sinless. He was the man who had to be sacrificed. And of course Jesus used him to find some of the disciples before he died. So Peter and John and I don't even know all the Bartholomew, all these guys that were with Jesus. They eventually became sinless saints after Jesus died. And that's when God revealed himself. He already revealed himself in Peter when Jesus was here. when Jesus was there. So Jesus knew before he died that there was at least one saint or one child of God, one disciple that God revealed himself to. That was important because that was a sign that Jesus could go die, get killed by the Romans. And then, that was just what the timing was. That was all in God's plans. Had nothing to do with Jesus, had nothing to do with Peter or anybody else. All God does all the work. Everything. He put it all together. He planned everything. Everything that happens here on this earth is because of God. So when Jesus died, these guys became sinless saints. Not at the same time. Not like Christians do it in church. God doesn't work that way. He works in individuals. Each one of them had a plan. A planned time. A lot of time that God would work in their life to get them sinless. And that can take several years. So this Pentecost story is a lie. It never happened. Now it was the Romans that added that so to deceive people. Okay, to deceive their Christians. Now I've already discussed the Christianity. Okay, and I discussed how about the New Testament and all that stuff was written by the Romans. So when I say this, you should be able to relate to this. Okay, so Pentecost didn't happen. So when Peter was the first one that became sinless, but it took God a while to get him to confess and repent of all his sins. It all depends on his nature and how strong they were. And so, who knows how long it took? It could have taken years to get Peter sinless. And after Peter became sinless, then God could reveal his knowledge. And then once he got this knowledge, then he gave Peter a strong desire to go preach the gospel. And all that means is to speak for God. That's all that means. He's God's voice. Peter is now God's voice. Jesus was God's voice when he was alive. Now Peter was God's voice. He's the same exact thing as Jesus was, except he's not the sacrifice. Okay, so Peter goes out and he preached to the other disciples. And they preached to the other disciples until God revealed himself into them, individually, of course. Who knows? I don't know who was first. Maybe John. Let's say John was the next. And Peter would keep preaching to the other guys, because it was God that was using Peter to make commands to these disciples, to make them confess and repent of their sins. So there was a lot going on after Jesus that was never recorded. And I'm sure they were written, but the Romans kept that out. That's a secret. They didn't want any of that stuff in there. Even in Acts, you can see some of that activity was happening, but you can't. It's hard to put it together. You almost have to have the whole story. John or Peter had to write out the whole story, exactly how it happened, and then it would have been a little easier to understand. But you still don't understand it because you're not there. Look at the disciples. It happened to Jesus, but he couldn't explain to them what it was like, because he was born sinless. He didn't have to go through this confession and repentance thing. So he couldn't relate to them guys. And or the disciples couldn't relate to him, because he appeared that way. I mean, they didn't know how he did it, and Jesus didn't really know how. So it wasn't until Peter, when he went through all that confession, repentance, he was the first one that had that story then, to be able to tell, people and his new saints and So this is what it took to become sinless. And of course, then from there it just spread. It just spread. You know, pretty soon there was 6, and then there was 12, and then there was, 50, and then 100, and, 200, 5,000, 10,000, who knows? I don't know how many thousands there were, but it grew. And the jealous Jews who had Jesus killed knew they had to do something about this. They couldn't have this. That was ruining their reputation. Because they were running around telling, putting down the Pharisees and Judaism. That it's a pagan religion. It has nothing to do with God. Just like I'm doing with Christianity today. So these Jews had to do something, and they went to the Romans, and then they got the Roman government to pass laws to kill off these saints. And so for the next 300 years, that's what the Romans did. Killed them off to get rid of this gospel and get rid of the saints. So that is how God worked with his saints. Okay? Everybody else remains sinners around them. Your families and friends that you grow up with, they remain sinners because they don't understand. This is not something we become a saint and then all your family members become saints. No. He just has certain people in certain places. The family of Jesus didn't know anything, understand a thing about him being sinless. They didn't understand. They didn't know what to think. Now they knew Jesus was, a good kid, a good person, but they didn't understand what he was saying. And that's why Jesus said when he went in there with his disciples to preach to his family and friends in the town they lived in, none of them were healed. None of them were. They didn't see any miracles. The reason is they couldn't see it. If you don't have a chosen one there that God needs to latch onto, get their attention, healings won't happen and miracles won't happen. They only happen for the chosen ones. That's why a lot of these miracles and healings in the New Testament are just a lie. It's just lies that the Romans added to make this Jesus look like he was a walking miracle worker. And it doesn't work like that. Not a bit. Now, all the miracles and healings were for the disciples only. And maybe for a few other people that saw, that were in, maybe there was some other disciples. I don't know. It's just so. It would only be those certain people that were going to become sinless saints after Jesus died. Now they say there was thousands of people. No, that's a lie. There wasn't. It was just a few. A saint can't work with thousands of people. Can you imagine God working with 1,000 people with one saint? You gotta spend a lot of time confessing, commanding them to confess sins and oh yeah, that's a lot of work. It's a lot to it. You only get a few at a time. But when you get a lot of different saints, and you have a lot of every, 4, 5, 6 people maybe 10 or 12, at the most. Sometimes only one. Some of these saints went into a town and they only found one person. And they preached that gospel to that one person for a few years. 1 or 2 years, whatever it took. Before that person became a sinless saint. But that saint would not leave this person, or if he did, if that person was free to go, let's say it was a young person, he didn't have a family and things like that, they would leave their family and friends. Now I left my family and friends for God. And a lot of those guys did. But there were times where the situation probably didn't need to leave their families and friends. They could probably stay. It's a bigger city. They were able to preach right like in Jerusalem. You didn't have to go. You had, probably millions of people living around there, close by. So you didn't need to do a lot of traveling. You could go out and come back at night or every few nights. But the ones that could leave, then they just followed along with the saint. and work with them. So in that respect, they probably had several people just following them around to different towns looking for more saints, chosen ones. And so you see, the rest of the people can't hear the gospel, they can't hear the truth, and that's how God planned it. He planned for all those people not to hear. There's a difference. There's a difference between the chosen ones and the sinners. And we're all sinners, but in our created state. The chosen ones were created as light energy, called the Word or the Holy Spirit, if you want. That's who they are in the flesh. That's their created nature. That's who they are. When they become sinless, then that's what I said. When God becomes you and you become God, that's who you are. That's your created nature. Well, everybody else is created as men by the light energy of God, by that power of God. Okay? God, that power created the rest of everything, all God's creation. And men were then created from that, and they were created male and female. Whereas we're created as light energy, we're created all as one person. It's not even a person. It's just one light energy, one light of God. We are the light. We are the Word. We're the spoken word. We speak for God. That's what we were created to do. Every word that comes out of our mouth is from God. The rest of the people don't do that. And that's the split. That's the separation. And then you're separated for eternity. Because God made us for eternity. We can't, there's nothing we did. We didn't do anything. We just followed God's commands to get where we're at. So anyway, but there's nothing wrong with that, because everybody's going to live in paradise, and you're going to have a wonderful life. Just like, and our life is going to be pretty busy actually, because God will be ruling everything. We'll be teaching everybody the knowledge of God. So we're going to be constantly in use for God. I don't know how much free time we're going to have with each other. I suppose we'll be friends. We'll be, having just lots of good conversations with each other, and we'll know each other well after eternity. But everybody else will have a great life. You got a partner, a lifetime partner, like Adam and Eve had. Lifetime. They'll never be separated. So you'll never be rejected. You'll never feel fear. All those different things. It's totally different than living in this age. Look at this age. We have people so fearful that, they can't hardly live. Can you imagine what it would be like to be born in Africa, in one of those places where everybody's starving to death, and children are laying on the roads, dead or dying, out in the field, the birds, eating their skin? Can you imagine waking up in a body like that? There's nothing, there's no hope, there's nothing, there's no religion. They don't understand anything but death. The stronger babies might make it. They eat whatever little thing they can eat, and some make it, but most of them die. Or how would you like to wake up in a body that, let's say, an Asian family, poor, they don't have any money, and you're a woman, you're a girl, okay, and they can't wait till you get old enough so you can go have sex with these perverted businessmen that come into town because they pay good money. Can you imagine that kind of life? You don't get a childhood. You're total fear of the next person you have to go to bed with. So you can see that that's our world, you see. Oh, not everybody has it that. I go to North Dakota and see my family. Everybody's living a good life. They eat good. They all have homes. They all, have work. They enjoy their friends and families, and it's just a wonderful life. Well, there you go. That's just another deception. Other people look at that and they say, "Wow, oh, I'd like to live like that." But then the deception would be to live there is living in the snow and the cold in the winter. So that deceived me. I left that in 1986. I didn't want to ever go back to that again. I did for a couple of years. That was another deception. But anyway, I was running around like a with my head cut off. I mean, like a chicken, with my head cut off. I couldn't get satisfied with anything. I had lots of different jobs. I lived in several different places, and moved a lot of times. So I just was never able to settle down. But that was my sin nature. And then once God, but God was involved too. He was allowing me to get into these situations, and then He pulled me out. It was conditioning. He wanted me to go through some really terrible times, especially financially. I went through 2 bankruptcies, and because of business. I mean, I just lost total control of them. And boy, I tell you what, when you come out of bankruptcy, you don't have much. You don't get much. You can't borrow money anymore for a while, and no, it was difficult. But He was telling me and showing me that I'm not a businessman, that I couldn't handle my money, and other people can. Other people handle their money really, really well and become very wealthy. I have a brother that's doing pretty well, but he knows how to handle money. He knows how to handle it, but he doesn't know how to handle other things in his life. And so, we all have something that we deal with. So all us saints, we all had struggles in our life, and a lot of us had criminal minds, alcoholics. Who knows? I mean, we were not really well accepted in our communities, but God used us anyway. Now, not all saints were like that. Some of them were following God. Well, look at Peter and I think he's got a brother, but they were looking. God connected with them and forced them to seek out God, Jesus. So there were some that were led by, but they were always led by God. It's not everybody just can go out and find God. That's what I'm saying. All the sinners can't do that. Only the chosen ones. And God will He will do whatever it takes to get these chosen ones to hear Him. Now, I didn't have a gospel to listen to, because there hadn't been a saint since the early 4th century that preached the gospel. So there was no gospel. He had to do everything within me. So I had to hear everything in my mind, in my heart, mind, and soul. That was my created instinct. So I had to go along with. I couldn't be hearing plain truth from the gospel like the disciples could hear Jesus. All those guys were fortunate because they had a saint there, right there, teaching them and bringing them, into this obedience. They had somebody to work with. I didn't. That's why it took him so long. It took me 29 years. And the reason for that is because of the timing. It just took him a long time to get me. I didn't have a guy, get on the floor, You see? Stop doing what you're doing. You can't do that. You're going totally against me. I didn't have anybody like that. Everything was coming from within. And boy, he used many different ways of getting me to hear, to see things, to understand. You know, he gave me desires. He gave me lots of visions, dreams. He even imprinted words in my mind. I could read them in my mind. He's phenomenal. He used a lot of humiliation to get me away from a certain thing. Whatever it took. Whatever it took. And he forced me the whole way through this. Now, it wasn't on a daily basis. That's not how he works. You know, when I first met him was in 1979, December 8th, 1979. He just made a sudden appearance. That was it. Just enough to let me know that's my Creator. And it just overwhelmed me just for a moment. And then he was gone. The next time he came was when he had me quit smoking cigarettes. 3 years later. 3 years. He's nothing. But I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was sobering up, and I did. I stayed sober. Then he took away my cigarettes. Then I started feeling the power. Then I could say, man, this is God. He's serious. You know, he's really serious about this stuff. And then he got me into Christianity, but I didn't understand that one. You know, he first got me in the Amway business, and then got me to stick it out long enough to get into this non-denominational church, and then I ended up church service at a AA meeting, not AA, at a Amway meeting. That's what it was, Amway meeting, and it was a big function, and that's when I first heard, you know, somebody talking about God and Jesus. In a way, I mean, a very, very powerful man, the way he was expressing himself. So it made me excited, and so then I went to this church service the next day and became a Christian. Well, you know, I said the prayer and all that stuff, and I didn't realize that was a deception at that time. I really thought I was, you know, a Christian, and I became a good Christian. I loved reading the Bible. Well, he gave me the desire to read it for 2 years straight. I couldn't get my head out of that thing, and then got involved in church and things like that, and I loved that parts of it, not everything, but I loved the music in our churches that I was into, and of course the people. I got to be friends with a lot of people. Now, if I went back to those people and shared the gospel with them, they'd just disappear. Absolutely disappear, because the truth is so much different than what they're learning. So it doesn't make any difference what religion you're in, whether you call yourself atheist or just non-believer. You know, a good Christian, you can be a priest, you know, you can be the Pope, a killer, a serial killer. You're all going to reject the truth. Every single one of you. You might follow it for a little while, but you're going to start finding stuff in there that you're going to reject, and then it's over for you. You rejected it, and that's called the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. You see, so when you die as a blasphemer, it's a sin that's never forgiven, but that is about your flesh. It's blasphemy from the flesh, okay? Not from your created thoughts that were coming into your mind. Okay, that's saved. And that will go on to the next age where you get a new body that will never blaspheme the Holy Spirit. Because the Holy Spirit will be speaking, you know, to everybody, teaching them things, and everybody will respond, you know, with love, with acceptance. You know, I mean, you're going to know it's God, put it that way, because you'll be able to hear the truth. You won't have deception in your flesh. So this blasphemy is only about the flesh. It had nothing to do with our created existence. So that's why that was just a deception put in the scriptures. And it doesn't make any difference if that was actually God that had that written that way, or the Romans that put it that way. Because if you blasphemed the church, then you were condemned to death. You see? Because they adopted a, oh man, the Roman Catholics really, that's why they're made of iron. That's why they were the feet of iron, because they ruled with all these extra rules and laws, just like the Jews had. That's how they dominated. Now the Protestant church, a lot of churches now are loosening up, and they're starting to realize that that's not right, but they still don't know where to go. They're still deceived. They're making things up as they go. That's why there's almost 40,000 denominations. They're all sinners trying to look for the truth. Well, they don't know what the truth is because they're not chosen. They were chosen to be sinners and die as sinners under the law and commandments. Well, what is the law and commandments? The Word that's in us. That's in us saints and the prophets and Jesus. That light energy. That's the power of God that's going to destroy this whole earth. You know, the fire in the earth is building up. It's going to blow pretty soon. And it's going to blow through the crust of the earth and melt it all. Everything is going to be destroyed because of the Word. Everything. So the flesh forms you. The Word forms the flesh for you to use and takes it away in this age. Only in this age. And the Word was the law and commandments. That's the written law and commandments you read. But the Word is the law. That is the one, the judge. That's the one that crushes the flesh and kills it during this age. So and then I had other videos here, about the Satan, devil, Lucifer and all them names, the wicked and the dead and things are the names of the flesh. Okay, that symbolic story in the beginning in Genesis, and they kicked Lucifer out of heaven and all his angels. Well, that's the flesh. That's the flesh of man. All the angels, that's the flesh of man. Just a little symbolic story to keep everybody deceived. Only us saints would understand it. So that's the flesh that was cast into the earth. Well, what's cast into the earth? The flesh. We're earthly flesh. We were created in God in heaven and then put on this earth, the flesh. That's what we're Lucifer. The flesh is Lucifer. The flesh is Satan. The flesh is devil. The flesh is wicked. And that's why it's being destroyed. But of course everybody's pointing fingers. You're wicked. You're wicked. You're going to, you're Satan. You're going to hell. And I'm going to be saved. Why are you saved? Because of your sin of pride? Everybody's going to die. There's nobody that's going to be saved. Even us saints die in the flesh because of our memories. Our memories are tainted. So was Jesus Christ. His memory was tainted. We die, all our atoms go back into the elements of the earth, and of course they'll be, in the magma, back in the magma, and then when the new earth cools off and everything starts coming back to life, then of course those atoms will be used again to form all our bodies. And but next time, never again will we die. There will never be deception because of our flesh, and we'll never call ourselves Satan or blame it on Satan like they do now. So that's all I need to talk about. I think this might have helped you start to understand why you can't hear the truth. But don't worry about that. Okay? We're not here to condemn you because you can't hear the truth. I rebuke Christians because they're telling me that they're saints. They're just liars, and they keep on coming after you. So you rebuke them. You try change your mind, but I can't force them. I just have to accept them. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate Christians. And those people that do listen for a while, I know pretty much that they're not going to keep on. So there's all kinds of different people, and that little parable that Jesus was talking about putting the seed out on the rocky ground, and then of course the seed gets taken away from the rocky ground, and well, that's where most people are at. Okay, that's where most people are at. That's the seed is the word that I speak, the spoken word. And most people will just, as soon as they hear a few sentences, they're gone. Then there's other people that the seed was put in the field with weeds. The seed grows up with the weeds, and that's the word that comes up, and you're being deceived by the world, but hearing this truth, and you're just kind of tossing back and forth. You're saying, what is this guy saying? And then you're hearing everybody around you tell, oh, get away from him. He's not, or maybe you got a sporting event to go to. You see, that's more important than this truth you're hearing. So then, of course, you die. I mean, you don't make it. And then the ones in fertile ground, the seed in fertile ground, is a chosen one. That's a chosen person, a person that will hear it and will respond to it and become a saint of the Lord's. And that 30, 60, 90%, 100%, there's really no scale. Once you become a saint of God's, you're just in His mercy. Whatever happens, happens. If I get 20 saints following me or none, that's all up to God. It's not up to me. So there's no performance basis. Okay, we become God's flesh, so He can use us for seeing, for hearing, for speaking, and smelling and touching and tasting. Not so much that He isn't so concerned about that, but the seeing. So when I go into the scriptures and read a prophecy, then He can interpret them. Okay, or seeing writing. Seeing is very important for detecting a false prophet. Well, just somebody that's a sinner that doesn't know the truth, and it's very easy to see. I mean, usually it takes one or two sentences, and I can spot a sinner. It's one that he doesn't know the truth, just in those few words, because it doesn't line up the way God's knowledge does. It has to agree with God's knowledge, or it's not the truth. And that's how we detect it. And of course our mouth, so we can speak to people, and our ears, important. Because when people speak to us, we can hear if they're lying or not. And but that's pretty much more if you have a chosen one around you. Okay. If you finally find a chosen one, and he's starting to hear you, and he's saying things that you can start lining up. But I haven't met anybody like that yet. Close. I thought I had some people go with me, hang with me for a month or so, and or even more, up to several months, and then they faded away. They left. So they were in that weeds. They were that seed in the weeds, growing up together, and then the weeds take over. The cares of the world is what they go for. So I'll leave it at this point, and I'll hit you next time. Thank you. Bye.